Hey, Adrian, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much. Happy to be here.
So as you know, the theme of this Green Pill series hosted by VDAO is resilience and anti-fragility. We generally start off with like the why for our guests. So carrying on that trend, I'm curious to hear from you. Like, what is your why? What motivates you when it comes to building local resilience?
hmm I think there is probably a good couple of things for me. It's an awesome question. Actually, it prompts me to kind of really actively focusing on that. So the I think it's like, as we many of us may be aware, we're certainly in uncertain times, and all that. So that's an obvious reason. But I think for me, it would be I really hold the concept of ecosystems in high regard. It's probably even a bit of a like a lighthouse for me in terms of like observing how natural systems seem to make it through a lot of various disturbance events. And all the even and so it's I find it fascinating, and so like if anything, it's a big inspiration for me as well, and kind of charting this path of resilience. And yeah, I've a family and all these things now, and so it's just like these things are I think more relevant than ever, and so yeah, so like I think it's important to be it's it's important to be to create a resilient family as much as possible, to have access to food, to water, to being there for my f to yeah, to being there for my family as well, to to being being there in my community as much as possible, that kind of thing. So yeah, I'll continue to kind of reflect on why as we talk, because I think there's many sort of layered threads to that.
Yeah, I think this kind of thread of uncertainty that like we're living in uncertain times.
Mhm.
I think that's shared by many people that are
Yeah,
drawn to build resilience. And also what I'm hearing is like ecosystems and ecosystem thinking is like really important to you. So like learning from nature and building on uh, the lessons that nature can teach us about like our resilient system, what a resilient system, resilient ecology looks like. Um,
absolutely. Yeah.
I'm curious to even just drill down on this term resilience itself. Like, what does that term mean to you? Like, how do you define resilience?
Totally. So I'll admit this term is, I think it's going through almost like my knowledge or understanding of the term is going through an evolution and all that, because there's parallel terms like anti-fragile. I just I can't recall the author. It's last year read a book on the subject as well, and which was really insightful. And so like I think there's a lot of different versions for it, but for me, kind of where the understanding that I think I keep gravitating towards too is that like it's again kind of taken from the ecosystem. So for me, when I think about the word resilience, I my current sort of appreciation understanding of it would be how does a system can sort of stay true to itself or hold itself together through various disturbances. And a disturbance is an ecological term for force or forces that are capable of dismantling that system or even greatly changing it. Change, I think, is a part of it, though. Change I think, has an interesting role, that I'm starting to realize that resilience may not necessarily mean something is unchanged. Things, I think, can change or perhaps even ought to change. Um, but there there there's also this, I think, this property of being able to maintain some degree of composure. So like in an ecosystem, a the like I think a great example would be a pine forest. So in our part of the world here, we have stands of two-needled pines, the lodgepole pine, for instance, which is a plant that is um, has actually evolved with wildfire. And in fact, actually, wildfire is quite necessary in order for the cones, the seeds of this type of pine to germinate. It's one of the stratification conditions, and so a wildfire may come through on some slopes and burn down these trees, and it may arguably look like the system has perished. But the fact is it hasn't. It goes through a renewal, and so then you get a whole new flush of seeds that are activated by the wildflower, and a lot of the fire that is, and still other plants like there's another plant that grows in the same ecosystem, Douglas fir, which has really, really thick bark, um, very deep roots, and so these plants can get burnt, but after the fire passes, above ground and most certainly below ground, these systems are these plants are still alive, and the community of creatures that live in support with them, are also alive, and so then the system starts to bounce back. It's only really recently that we're seeing wildfires of such a large size that are arguably unnatural because of past land use patterns, that we're starting to see burns that never been hotter or never been larger, that are actually capable of dismantling these systems. But wildfire, as a disturbance, has like arguably made this system stronger because these Y you'd always have a patchwork mosaic of various fires of various intensities, and so then in the end of the day, that led to an increase of forest health because you have differing ages, you have differing species compositions in light of these wildfires, and then you had a higher net species diversity and all that. I know it's starting to sound technical, but there's an ecosystem that is enduring, of a whole lot of disturbance and all that.
Mm.
There's many, many, many examples, and I'd be happy to go into them, but it's just that's the first one that came to mind. So yeah. So in summary, there's enough there's enough connections, there's enough interactions with neighboring creatures, that when a disturbance comes through, even though some of those connections might be knocked off, the system is defined by so much interconnectivity that it has a really high survivability, even though its form might change at that moment. The system is very much alive, and so yeah, that's kind of like the current sort of understanding and appreciation of the term resilience for me at this moment.
And it sounds like from what you're saying, like um, you mentioned anti-fragility earlier, but what I'm hearing from your description of the forest fire is the an ecosystem that can get stronger through a disruption or can become more diverse, more is actually has some innate quality that like the disruption comes and then some new growth happens and some positive change comes.
Absolutely, and I think there's also a layer of, like, positive feedback loops in it as well. Like, for instance, if we look at really that similar system again, like, some of the strongest wood is seen, from trees that are growing in constant disturbance where you have, like, for instance, very, very high winds. You have the strongest root systems, and so, like, this disturbance in general is a it's it can be regarded as a very positive property, and it provides a positive feedback loop, 'cause then the more strength that you have, then, like, those roots are going in really, really deep to resist that wind, the wood is getting really strong and thick, and then that has this then property of helping to stitch the terrestrial landscape together all that more, and so wind, which is capable of erosion and weathering, is actually working. It's being facilitated by the plants to strengthen up, the terrestrial landscape. So, like, you have all sorts of positive feedback loops, that are associated where you have systems through disturbance just wanna get stronger. And I find that property so beautiful.
If we're to move on to think a bit about your life, like over in Canada, I'm curious to learn a bit about how have you tried to make your own life and your local community more resilient? Like, what steps have you taken?
Yeah, so I think there's several. Well, number one would be like kind of like the active sense of trying to build community. That would be to like even if it's just like cultivating like a network of really trusted and good quality friends in my community through working on things that like we all care about so much and contributing to that. So like I think one of the first things that it did when I got into the permaculture movement is started the Calgary Harvest project, which we had a conversation about in the past. And so essentially, Calgary Harvest it's a network that does a couple things, or I should say, it aims to do a couple of things at once. What it does is it causes people to get to know one another, and I've seen actually some really good friendships, for instance, build out of that network. Like, people literally met one another picking apples from local trees in the city of Calgary here, and then those friendships have come to be, very very active, and it's like a meaningful connections have occurred between people essentially out of thin air. And that was one of the aims to kind of like, yeah, help cause that to happen. Another one is that, like, it's a community of, it's a food community. It's a good quality food harvesting and preserving community. So for those of you, listening, Calgary Harvest is a project that started several years ago, just in summary, that it connects people who, like, homeowners or property landholders in the municipality of Calgary here, who have fruit trees already growing on their properties, who don't have the time or the resources or the ability for whichever reasons to be able to harvest all or any of that fruit. And so what the organization then does is that it then connects people who are looking for like fresh quality fruit that doesn't have pesticides on it, for instance, that's local, um, even even different types of fruit that, like, hasn't really been seen before, because, like, the conventional apple industry really only has about 4 or 5 different varieties and all that. Here we have hundreds of different niche varieties and all that, so the fruit's really, really interesting. But what it does is it connects people who are looking to glean that fruit with those property owners who have the fruit, and so it's kinda like a natural connection that emerges, and it builds these relationships so that if like, say, if there's ever a disturbance in our food system, for instance, this network is still gonna be alive, and in fact is gonna become even more in demand, and so that was the primary reason for creating the project. But kind of like a secondary emergent property of that is that, well, it's creating community. It's actually creating community, and it's building friendships and all that. And so while it wasn't the primary aim, it's, I think, a very, very important secondary aim, for all of us here, to build, like, even another layer of resilience in our families. So, like, we'll always now have like a source for fruit and food and canning parties and apple juice and things like that. So I think that's another layer. I think some other things that I'm doing is that I've been, over the years, really learning how to harvest rainwater, grow my own food, have our family growing our own food, help other people, and share the lessons of what we've been learning, for other people to contribute, to there as well. I've like, perhaps I'm embarrassed to say, I've only just recently learned how to actually start making compost, which is like, it's it's such an important skill, because it's this is where a lot of, um, being able to use our own hands to actually grow our own food starts, because, we've sort of accidentally burnt through our soil, and it's just like actually watched our soil fertility decline, because we've actually been taking more than we've been giving back. And I think this is another sort of concept that we knew that we would have had to do it, but we were just kind of like, we were planting new things and working on various other projects through the years, and didn't give it its due attention. And so now that's starting to turn around, because getting off topic here, because that's a whole chapter into itself. But
Well, I think the compost thing is really interesting because it's, in fact, like I would be quite curious to go into these topics about things like composting. You've talked about canning, like these are old skills, I guess you could say. I mean, they're people are keeping them alive, but it's probably more common for your average gardener to like go out to a hardware store to buy compost or a garden center to buy compost than it is for them to kind of get serious about making it themselves. And the same with canning, right? Like,
Mhm.
um, what you're talking about with canning is like uh, Calgary Harvest, going around the local neighborhoods, harvesting food. But then if you have the surplus that it can't all be used in one go, like then you're going to can it and preserve it for the winter. So I wonder, maybe you can just touch upon those two topics and
Totally.
perhaps also how it relates to like preserving traditions that can enhance resilience that may otherwise be lost in a more advanced technological age with like global supply chains rather than like niche local community.
Totally. And so I think maybe I can open up with a kind of like a concept that I think is describing a lot of this, and the motivations thereof as well, is that, like, I'd argue that most phenomena that we see in the world would be described by like a sine wave. Maybe not a nice balanced regular sine wave, but more just like a pattern of like peaks and valleys. Their wavelength, of course, might vary and all that, but like things aren't linear. And so the and I'll relate this here in a second. And so like kind of like what we might see swings of temperature, or swings of like what the stock market is doing, and all these things, like it's just like it expresses itself. If we think about, there's a technology called um I'll keep this really quick, but there's a neat technology that actually anyone can build, called a rocket mass heater. And the principle of the rocket mass heater is that it's a very, very simply made stove. And at its essence, what it does is that you burn wood. It burns it really, really efficiently, but the stove also has a huge amount of thermal mass. So if you burn the fire long enough, then that heat then gets absorbed into the thermal mass. And so then once you have heat charged into thermal mass, um, then it starts to, even when the fire is not burning, then it's providing a lot of that heat. And I've actually and so we have one of these in our little greenhouse, and for instance, and so without burning that, you can get some crazy temperature swings, and which are almost destructively too high and then destructively too low. And so by operating a simple rocket mass heater technology in our greenhouse, we can actually moderate those peaks and valleys. And it's that moderation pattern that a lot of construction starts to happen. So like very another quick example is that people are using climate batteries in greenhouses now, because they can actually take excess summer heat and charge that into the ground to warm up the air in the wintertime. And so it constructively uses the peak to bring up the destructive low temperatures, and that, so that's just yet another example. You see it all the time in nature and natural systems. Um, Ponds, for instance, it'll be a good idea for many landscapes to, if possible, for a multitude of reasons, to build ponds. But one of them of which is it can shave off low temperatures to offset frosts, for instance, because it takes on heat during the growing season, or during the warm periods of the day, and then it moderates the temperature. And so, as a concept, like, I think we can apply this to our lives as well. And the so like canning, for instance, is an excellent example of this concept, because like even in our garden, um, in cold temperate Calgary, where when the sun shines in the summertime, it shines hard, and you get a huge flush of growth, way more than you could even conceivably eat during the growing season. Like, we now regard our garden not as our summer food source per se. We regard it or as our we regard it as our way of producing and then being able to store our winter food. And so because like the growing season when it's in full effect, it's a big peak. It's like it's almost I wouldn't say destructively, but it's way more than we can possibly know what to do with. And so that is the reason why we preserve food now, because then that becomes our the low, of course, being in the middle of the winter and the early spring when nothing is growing. That's the low. That's the lack of quantity that we're trying to pull up from the summer season. So again, it's moderating those highs and lows. So it's kind of like the concept of like I think it's a part of the I would argue it's a part of the resilience conversation because it's like what can we look at that's around us that if unchecked is almost destructive or it's leading to waste like in terms of when resources or energies are available, and then where can we find those adjacent situations where like okay well it's not in supply and all that and so it's kind of like the concept almost like the conceptual reason for canning. Now I went to do a tangent, so I almost forget the original question. You'll have to remind me. Um,
Oh,
yeah.
you kind of covered it. It it was just about like um yeah, like to talk us through canning and the
Mhm,
like the reasoning for that, like why that would be important at this point. I guess
mhm,
from what you described, like you're bringing back a lot of old technology, you know. I mean, and not that it ever fully went away, but you're continuing that trend. You mentioned rocket stoves there. Rocket stoves you can build by hand, right? And you can even use it to heat your home. If they're built into obviously in a safe way, into your home, you can do that. Um, but yeah, I guess what we're touching upon here is like water. You mentioned rainwater harvesting. Maybe we can touch a bit more on that.
totally.
Food,
Yeah,
obviously, food has come up quite a lot. Like you're talking about Calgary Harvest, which is about kind of tapping into the abundance of the city and bringing it together, building community around that. And then energy with the rocket stove kind of model,
yeah,
like using that to heat your greenhouse. These are the three domains we tend to look at when we're thinking about resilience, and I often ask people how they have kind of what they're doing for their food resilience, their water resilience, and energy resilience. Like you've already touched upon those three. But is there anything there that you'd like to touch upon in more detail, or any? I like going off on tangents, so yeah. What tangent would you like to go off in right now?
yeah, totally. There's all sorts. Like really, we're actually making a conscious choice to almost move towards like lower tech, like what one could dub as lower tech, because it's like canning and we're now like yeah we're making our own sauerkraut. We're relatively new to all this. Like I come from a path of life where like none of this was even remotely in my consciousness and all that. So we're like completely immersing ourselves into learning these new sort of low tech skills and all that because it's just it's once we learn those things they're with us. We can teach that to our children and like they don't require nearly as long of a complicated supply chain or sort of prerequisite entities and all that, which we don't have control over, and that sort of thing. And so like there, once we learn these skills, and I think that's why I was originally bringing up composting because it's like once we know that we're and we can demonstrate the results of compost as well. Is it's like that's that that's a skill that we'll have forever. We don't really rely on too many other things in order for that to happen. Um, and we're growing a lot of what goes into that compost now. We have like easily 40 or 50 different genera of plants that then go into that compost, which all of them host their own microbes. So we're going to get the microbiology really as diverse as we can get it, and that's what we can do with all of our own pairs of hands. And so there's a stability in that, and we have worm compost as well. So which then yet breeds different types of micro. It's a different process for creating microbe, and we generally learned that, like, it's not so much the quantity, it's also, like, eating and as well as, like, we now every week we decided to chart it, and we eat about 40, and that's climbing right now, 40 different types of direct plant fibers, in per week in our diet. And it's kind of like a meal planning thing now. It's just something that we just recently started doing is that if we're wondering what we're gonna cook, well, we look on the list, it's just like, "Okay, well, what direct types of plant fibers do we not yet have this week? Okay, well, we'll make a dish that incorporates that." And so we're hitting about 40, um, um, moving on to 50, of those per week, and so so from what the research that we did is just like that helps make the gut microbiome like super happy, and all that because it needs then to conjure up and sort of breed the right kind of microbes to be able to digest that food, and it has like positive properties for the immune system and these sort of things, right? And so the same with the compost, like all of this, like we can do right here at a house. We don't need a lot of external inputs for that. We live on an urban lot, so of it's like of course we do need to rely on the the what I'll call the outside food system to bring some of those things to our plate. One day we'll be living more rurally, and so then that's when we like to aim to be able to really take a shot of like growing a much larger portion of these raw kind of plant foods on site or in trade with local members of the community. But we see our urban life here as a really good way of like learning some of these ground skills before we apply them at a larger level. So that's that's another reason why we're seeing this as an opportunity. But it's and from the water standpoint as well. Like this is a whole other layer, right? Because like we harvest on our urban lot here. We're harvesting. We it changes year by year. Yeah, last year we had a quite a the year before that is we had a bone dry year. Last year, we actually had quite a bit of water. Um, Last year, we are able to irrigate all of our food crops. About 90% of it was irrigated by rainwater. We only had to draw on this on municipal water supply for about up to 10% of that, just for those one really nasty dry stretch, and all that. But one of the reasons was we discovered is because our garden soil, um, as I mentioned earlier, we've been taking from it more than we've been giving because we've been slow to learn composting. Um, the composting also has this enormous property of water retention in the soil. So as we build up that organic matter, create that surface area and all that with our compost, we put our first load of compost on last year that we have actually been able to make ourselves. It looked like a Black Forest cake, and that was beautiful. And it's just it takes a long time for the water to leave that structure, and so we're actually going to be sort of working on our localizing our water budget sheerly through building compost as well, because that's the reason why we had the water more, is we discovered, is because we left our soil to go unhealthy, and all that. So so we discovered we're really going to be able to move closer and closer to um, taking care of our own water needs. And as you may have heard, is just Calgary is going through sort of repeated situations of large diameter water main pipe breakages, where the one 2 years ago was during the growing season. There were quite strict water restrictions, and so we would not have been able to irrigate our garden with the municipal water supply anyway. We were able to, but the fact is we were able to cover most of that with our rainwater and all that. So it's just like the supply lines for bringing water to gardens is literally compromised. It's literally being checked in the city of Calgary, for instance. And so just as a almost as a playful example, basically I was saying is because of these water main failures in the city of Calgary, for instance, it's been kind of like like almost like a playful example of of the need for building local property scale irrigation water resilience, because quite literally the water supply has not been available um, for for a growing season. Um, to be able to grow one's own food. And so we've fortunately been able to have enough tank storage to get ourselves through most of that. Now, with us learning that the role of compost and soil tilth um, is actually even more important than the rain tanks themselves, um, we'll be able to sail through really any supply issue here with water for a garden, because we've been through some pretty like the water main break coincided with a year that we've only got about 190 millimeters of rainfall availability during that summer. So it's quite droughty. Um, so um, yeah, so it was a neat experience to go through that situation. Mhm.
What I'm hearing from, like, listening to you describe your journey is, like, the importance of this from the point of view of well-being, like, eating healthy food, like you're talking about your gut biome, that seems to be a major motivator for you, and I'm curious also just to pick up on this point around, the low-tech solutions. I know that you're someone that does work with tech, you know, you're a landscape designer, you're working with QGIS, mapping software, various other technologies to design and implement kind of regenerative systems on the land. Yeah, I'm curious, like, what your thought is on that. Like, do you see this as being a kind of this lifestyle as like a rejection of tech, or is it more about like having these skills sets in your armor, if you like, or in your toolkit that you
Yeah.
can pull upon if there is a disruption to the system. For example, if like the local municipal water supply goes down in an urban area.
Mhm. It's a great question. I think it's like tech has a role. I think tech, well, maybe we can call it high tech in this sense, absolutely has a role. And like while it's available, while the systems are running, I think those are going to represent opportunities to kind of like create, like use them almost to create better communities or greater resilience. Use them, and like I love using CAD and the QGS, like it's sort of in my working capacity, because I can see that it's quite literally helping people, and families create these new systems on the ground that then they'll be stewarded, and through time they'll translate the biomass and living creatures, and them building food production systems on their properties. And so it's almost like a but I'm training myself to almost regard them as a fast track. It's just like much like um let, let's like when we get land, for instance, it's one of the first things I'm going to do after identifying where we're going to store water on the site. Of course, I'm going to bring in an excavator, this immense piece of high tech that that can that can dig something that would create that would create huge amounts of like labor saved, for instance. But then it's just but then I know that pond is gonna be there indefinitely. It's gonna start contributing to the ecology. So it would be like, I don't wanna say it's an appropriate use of these things in this particular sense. It is. It's like, but it just yeah, like I'm personally and philosophically more than happy to kinda use the high tech in this case for the aims of earth repair or helping and initialize a community. Same with Calgary Harvest, it relies on tech stack. It relies on we're actually getting our IT system sort of more technically capable than it's ever been for this next season, with a lot of automation and things like that to take the workload off, so that one day we can share all the tech stack and we can help other jurisdictions basically just pick this up and get going with it, because the planet and the community, it, like, needs it, and all that. And so I think, in summary, I think high tech can instigate, and help facilitate creating these systems that might, once they're on the ground, might really be fueled and powered by more more low tech, um, approaches, but they really help initialize and instigate it. So I'm not sure if that addresses the question, but that's just kind of sort of my personal take on it.
Yeah, it does. It does. I'm curious to touch also on this idea of like urban resilience. Like you've talked about how you live in an urban plot right now. Are you you also mentioned that you're moving in, you're thinking about moving into a more rural area. Like, do you think urban resilience is possible? It sounds like I'm assuming you do because you like built quite a resilient lifestyle there. But like, how do you view that difference between like urban resilience versus like more rural or like bigger scale, like maybe like large homestead or small homesteads up to like farm scale level, like resilience?
Well, yeah, I think there's a number of layers to this. So in summary, I believe that urban resilience is achievable, because like it's because, like, that's where, like, I think there's a lot of opportunities in the urban sense, because that's where like still now, like, as of, I think, I don't know, was it 15 years ago or something like that, like, most of the Earth's human population now lives, more in an urban, in cities versus out of cities. But it's like, there's a lot of issues with how, I think, with how cities are built nowadays. And like, there's an argument that how on earth could they ever be, um, resilient, in terms of the way they're built. Like, we have centralized waste systems that it just takes, it just it like, somebody could literally hack it, and then all of a sudden our central sewage processing plants, could stop working overnight, or as we've seen with the water pipes and things like that. But I think that's more of a property of, like, that doesn't necessarily define what a city is. Like, I think that's just the way that the cities are organized and operated right now, but it doesn't need to be the way. It's just the prevailing pattern. Um, it's the industrial pattern, and centralization, central control, a dendritic but yet linear, relationship to a central point of operation, and those kinds of things. But it's like, the we like in our we live on a typical sized urban lot, and um, w and it's it's unbelievable how much food we produce, I have to admit, even from a food standpoint. It's like, we have, um um, our freezer is still chock full with berries. We eat a lot of berries, probably too much, and all that. We're gonna be changing our diet to almost eat berries more, like, closer to when they're ripe and all that, and not eat them when they're not ripe. Like, I think that's a whole other conversation unto itself. But, like, we still have 4 shelves in our freezers full of our front yard berries, and yet still eating them, and all that. And so, as we learn the ground skills, kinda like the low tech skills of fermenting, lacto fermenting, other, sauerkrauts, other sort of preservation, methods, like, we've seen from experience, as I mentioned earlier, just how much greens, vegetative greens, that can be produced. It's unbelievable. Like, we had so much lettuce, because we just walked around and spread the seeds around. Like, it was growing like a weed. It was actually coming out of the sides of our garden beds. It was on our garden pathways. It was everywhere, and all that. So, as we learn, and then there's, like, with annual vegetable gardening, for instance, and market gardening and all that, there's, like, time stacking, strategies that you can use. While one crop is growing up but not producing it, you can have other crops that are growing alongside it that don't really interrupt its root system, that can be produced. So as we learn time stacking, and all that, like, every square foot is gonna be producing even more and more and more and all that. So all this is to say that, like, if there were more people choosing to to do this kind of thing on their properties, like like, it's just crazy what could be produced in the city. You don't I'm currently my current understanding, of course, that could evolve as I learn new things, but my current understanding, of the situation is that, like, we 'cause we could be producing vastly more in terms of an urban population's food needs right from that urban center, and relying way less on the sort of the rural hinterlands of where that are shipping food into the cities. Like, I think it's to game changing, quantities and with no extra need for water because all of these could be rainwater powered. We're trying to live it. We're trying to do it. We're trying to prove the concept. And the main barrier as we see it right now is our own knowledge of gardening, which has yet to improve and all that. And so now and then you can bring in micro livestock in the city as well. We are going to be putting in a chicken system. We'll have 3 hens and then that's gonna be connected to our compost system and all that, so for eggs and things like that. So, yeah, it's like a long way of saying even if an urban property couldn't feed 100% of the food needs for the people living on that property, even if we did 60 or 70%, that's a game changer. And, so and I'm just talking about food, and so then there's other reasons to form community between people as well, and all that. But maybe food could serve as a proxy because food is a pretty important element of the triad of components needed for a healthy life, of course. And so yeah, so the opportunity I think is in the cities.
It makes me wonder, like, on this journey you've been on when you've been developing this urban resilience, in what ways would you say it has improved your life? And also, in what ways would you say it's like it's been really hard? Like, what have been the biggest challenges, maybe unexpected challenges that you faced on this transition?
Yeah, like I think that for the challenges to begin off with that is I think it is like there's been a whole slew of like practical challenges, and that that I think we're generally being able to overcome. Like for instance, even the example that I cited with our burning out our soil fertility and that sort of thing. Fortunately, we've been able to like a lot of these what I'll call these local challenges are are the gamut of them are learning opportunities and so they actually serve as opportunities and we tried to adopt the mindset of like how can we change these challenges into the prescription for how we'll do things differently and all that, and so we had enormous failures, like, just like, we really have been learning this the hard way, like this urban homesteading. I think other larger scale challenges, that we can witness, that I think are gonna be important in the discussion are, like, it's how to inspire, I guess I don't wanna say change in this regard because, like, I wanna be mindful of that we've chosen this path for ourselves, and it's just we don't want to ever be in sort of the situation of saying, "Okay, well, then that means other people should be doing this as well." But from a practical as objectively practical and from a practical objective standpoint, on the topic of resiliency, as more people, for instance, harvest their own rainwater, produce their own healthy food and all that, like, I think it's a fair argument that's gonna bode well for the resilience in the stability of the community if, like, the imported food suddenly oil gets expensive and all that. Um it's gonna bode well and all. So the challenge has been kind of like I'll put it say it this way, I've offered and have already done like basically propagating edible shrubs from our garden and saying like, here's a plant. It's for free. This plant normally would cost you $30. here's where you could plant it, and all that. And that plant either has been rejected, like the offer has like I'm not interested on the part of like neighbors or things like that, or that plant has been taken, but it hasn't been cared for, and then dies. Because like when you plant a new garden, it's like kind of like a baby. You need to take care of it for its first 2 or 3 years, 1 or 2 years, and all that. But it's like the it's I think the challenge is that like, and ourselves included, is that like there's definitely almost like a there's a treadmill trap, that where it's easy to be so consumed with the other facets of life that then kind of taking an unconventional approach to life and being on the property and all that, it almost incurs extra energy. You have to find that energy from somewhere, and that time from somewhere. And I think for a lot of people, like, we've been relatively lucky. Like, we have jobs and things like that, and we have an income and all that. That's not even as much the case with other people. Some people are like all they have to work 2 jobs, and it's just like it's this property of this greater system that has this it traps people, and then it's like it's harder to kinda, like, take a different path, even though that might be a practically more useful path, for instance, at least from reducing water bills or growing their own food or what have you standpoint and all that, and it's not easy.
Fully agree. I think that like
Mm.
what you touched upon there, I think is like the convenience. There's a certain convenience of the all the modern ways of life
Yeah.
that the idea of going out in a garden to grow food, maybe a little bit of like leisure time, like maybe some people are into that, but the idea of like growing your own food and like making your like y- having rainwater harvesting, there is, I think it can seem like a major leap for people that are on that treadmill, which I would suggest is partly why it's still quite niche in a way. Like we saw this massive peak in people
Yeah.
getting interested in this way of life once their other stressors of work and so on were reduced somewhat and they didn't have to go into the office. They were at home a lot more. There was a
Mhm.
this massive spike in interest in like growing your own food. And then also downstream of that, like just pure resilience. During that COVID shock, it wasn't clear what was going to happen to the
Mhm.
centralized systems we all depend upon. So there was multiple different reasons that were
Yeah.
kind of pushing people towards this lifestyle. And I see those two trends only continuing. And if we can make it easier, we can, like you said, you're living it. You're not wanting to force other people into it, but you're also like setting a you're leading from the front in a way, right? You're like setting
Mhm.
an example of like, hey, this can actually be good. It can improve well-being. It's healthy. It's enjoyable. It's fun. It can be
Yeah.
done. So,
We're actually gonna start doing urban tours again, where we're gonna invite, basically create events where we can invite members of the public to the yard to see, and so that we can explain kinda how things are work and, how things work, and what it takes to kind of live with these things working in our lifestyle, because it's just like I still firmly believe that of like the role of stories. I think it's important that the story of these things are told, because it still has the still has the capacity to inspire people then to take a different path, and like it's there's especially in the cities, this is where like that critical mass can happen, where like a certain number of people take on a like an urban homestead, relatively more resilient lifestyle, like, and I didn't even mention the biodiversity, like, just as a quick aside, we're seeing crazy insect populations in our yard, and all that, because it's an island. Because like, a lot of the passing species will stop over, and then they stay. We're seeing crazy butterflies that I haven't seen anywhere else in Calgary and all that. And I do a lot of observing. I do a lot of walks, and these like actually like biodiversity and habitat creation is actually one of my personally one of my primary aims for doing regenerative landscape design and all this is like, yes, the community is important. Growing the food and harvesting rainwater is important, but at least equally as important for me is the recreation of habitat and creating habitat corridors so that other creatures can live. Like this is, I discovered as of late, this is one of my primary motivations for doing this. So what we're trying to steward in our yard as well. And so if this story is told and more people start to do this, well, then these aspects of resiliency that we're talking about start to unfold, but then the biodiversity picture also starts to unfold at the same time. So, as a next step, we're going to reopen, or we're going to start doing these urban yard tours again to try and pass the story along, because we haven't really been doing a good job of passing the story along to date, because we've been entrenched in all these facets of life. Like we have a yeah, like we a 3-year-old daughter and all that, and it takes time, takes fantastic time, and all that, but it's just like we've there's been projects that we wanted that have been on hold, but now the time is coming to unhold those and to start, getting on with them, and that's one of them is those yard tours to pass the story. But I was gonna say another point I was gonna quickly say is let me know for overtime as well. As they say, nothing is free. And the thing is that, like, as we this is kind of like another quick sort of commentary on the challenge piece is that, like, when we say, "Yes, I'm going to," when we say yes to the city, yeah, we'll pay you to bring water in through a pipe, or the utility will pay some money to bring in natural gas through a pipe to keep our house warm, or we like all of these things where we kind of like hire the industrial system around us, which is which basically creates these channels of convenience. Which, yeah, like on one hand, you have to be very, very, very grateful for it. It's pretty crazy that we can have a cold spell and we wake up or we wake up in the morning and that heat has automatically turned on, because the temperature went below 19 degrees Celsius, which is what we keep our or 18 at night, and so then the thermostat goes and the house magically warms up and all that. These On that sense, it's pretty amazing that that happens, but on the other sense, then it creates these layers of dependency, and like, I don't think my understanding is I don't think our quest is gonna be becoming independent, to like totally completely revamp our systems so that we have no dependencies on these things. I think it's more we want to become interdependent. Like on our urban property here, for instance, I don't think we're going to be able to grow and coppice all of our own fuel wood to have a wood burning stove and all that because our lot's small. But we're gonna be like, I'm gonna be learning, here starting this growing season, and before the growing season, happens is my like, I'm gonna be, signing up for the journey of becoming pretty I wanna become pretty darn good at growing shiitake mushrooms, for instance, and I'll be more than happy to provide, somebody who is growing small diameter, high BTU, coppice fuel wood, and bring that onto the property in exchange for shiitake mushrooms, for instance, because it's they can be quite productive and all and all that, just as an example, and all that. So that's that's an interdependency that I like. I really, really want to be a part of,
Yeah.
um, and it creates community as well, and all that. And so I think a challenge has been, um, is that like as a society we have really, really, really created that dependency on these lines of convenience, um, to such a degree that even the notion of departing from them is almost scary, and all that. We're kind of relatively locked in, it takes a bit of, yeah, it's gonna be very, very uncomfortable for many to kind of like even
Courage to
yeah,
break the
it's
dependence.
and all and that's where I've been as well, and all that. It took me 10 years to kinda unlearn, at a conceptual level, those things, and I think I'm still on that journey, right? Like, it's not easy and
Yeah,
all that, yet I think it's relevant for this, discussion, so
yeah,
mhm.
100%. Well, just to kind of pull things to a close, I wanted to thank you for coming on and sharing your story. And you mentioned there about like different commitments you've got and how that's got in the way of the storytelling you wanted to do in your local community. But I wanted to say, like, just sitting here having this conversation with you, it's really got across to me, you know, how intentional and careful and thoughtful you've been on your journey here as you're trying to develop this local resilience and anti-fragility. And I think I've learned a lot from just hearing you talk about your journey. And just to wrap things up, I wonder if you have anything to share for someone that's maybe like you 10 years ago or 15 years ago is like starting to think about this and maybe looking at the way the world is, uncertainty, increasing polarization and so on, and wanting to develop more local resilience. Like, what would you say to them at this point, to inspire them and to advise and guide them at this point in their journey?
I'll preface that with my answer is gonna be biased. And but the bias is for me is, take regular walks, spend regular time in intact ecosystems, and build the time to see how they work. Um, and like, almost ask the question of, like, why doesn't this organism or that organism, like, how do I put it? It's like they have found they have found a way to live. The practice or the study of ecology is literally about the question of how things make a living. I think a lot of this conversation is how do you make a living? Um, it's like it's kinda like probably the most asked social question when you're at a party and you're getting to know someone, and usually what people ask is like, "Hey, what do you do?" 'Cause I think I really do think we have this innate curiosity to uncover how people are making a living. And so when you extend that, it's like to the home and the place. It's just like all we're talking about here is like how does one make a living? And how one makes a living is not necessarily about what your job is. That's just a part of it. The whole story is that, like, how are the things that you need in order to live, so these energies or resources coming in, how are they met by by other people or things that are around you? Right now, we've outsourced those to literally things that are super far away, and then we might be on this treadmill. But the other part of the question is okay, well, what I'm producing, how is that useful for other people and all that? And so, like, when we walk in the forest, always we see these things, and we can start to see these things. We can start to see, well, that leaf litter that falls down on the ground below a deciduous tree is actually turning into mulch. It's the food for the fungi that are literally bringing nutrients and water and minerals, to that tree. It's carbon and all that. Or we can see that it's protecting the ground from the drying rays of sunlight or wind. And so if we stick our finger in it, oh yeah, it hasn't rained in 3 weeks, but it's still moist. Right, and that water is necessary for the life for these things, these things, and so I think I know this is a kind of, maybe it's a silly answer. That's why I warned, it's biased, because how I got into
I love
this
it.
is
It's
that
great. Like,
it yeah, like, I ended up taking, like, a course in permaculture, and it completely changed my career, but I think it's because I got to go on many walks in the forest, so I was a bit predisposed, I think, to it. But yeah, it's my nerdy answer.
it's great
So,
advice. Like,
mm,
if anyone's thinking about becoming more resilient, just go for a walk. I think that's like the perfect advice. Ideally in a forest where you can see
yeah,
the healthy ecosystem at work.
I think a
That
lot of it's like it would be like potentially a destructively simplistic answer, but I think a lot of the problems that we're trying to grapple with society and resilience and all that, a lot of their analogies can be found in these systems, and we're suffering from the effects of these not being there, I think, because yeah, we've abdicated responsibility for supply lines and all that to really, really long, linear, unresilient supply chains and all that. But like a lot of what we're trying to solve, I think, is at least analogies thereof are found in these areas and all that. So
cool. Well, thanks a lot,
yeah,
Adrian. It's been great to talk to you, and I would love to talk to you again in the future once you have taken this next step in your journey and moving into a more rural plot. Maybe we can come back in a year or two and have that conversation again.
totally. Yeah, anytime. Yeah.
Thanks a
So
lot, man.
it's been a pleasure. Yeah.